In this episode, we are going to cover the most famous coding interview question, which is autocomplete, which is also popular by Typeahead. The question is so popular that it is commonly asked in interviews of Google and almost all startup companies. So, welcome back to Check the System Design series. We have Raj, who is a front-end engineer at Flipkart, to conduct a mock interview with us. So today your learning is not just limited to the code. You will also learn the thought process behind cracking and cracking the coding interview round, right? So we'll be covering a lot of interesting stuff like performance optimization, security, and much more. Not limited to that. In this episode, I have especially kept a lot of hidden gems in between the episode where you will be learning about concept like debounce, throttle, intersection observer, and abort controller. So before moving on, just hit the like and subscribe button and watch this episode till the end. So we have Raj with us. He's UI engineer at Flipkart. Previously, he was working with the Razorpay, and he has no doubt cracked a lot of interviews across, you can say, as a UI engineer in multiple companies. We are glad to have him here and share his knowledge regarding machine coding and what are the best practices, what are the thought process you need to have while cracking a machine coding round, because it is your entry level, right? If you are good at machine coding, your chances to get into the company is very high. So Raj, it's on you. Yeah.
Thanks, Chirag. I'm glad to be here. Yep.
Yeah, great. So we are going to have a machine coding round, as we said. Any guesses what we are going to build today, Raj?
Something sort of a notification toast or like a game.
Okay.
Not sure exactly.
Okay, maybe as you said, something we are going to pick very popular. That is no doubt for sure. So let's see what we are going to do. And let me give you a hint. It is very popular. Most of the time it is asked in, say, suppose Flipkart, Google sort of interviews. And let me reveal that we are going to have autocomplete. Let's dive into that.
Okay.
What is the expectation and what we are going to do? This is your problem statement. So as we said, we are going to build autocomplete, which is low-level design and machine coding round, we can say. The tech stack which we are going to use in Vanilla.js, HTML and CSS. We are not going to use any of the framework, because if you are good at, people expect, if you are good at vanilla JavaScript, you can actually learn any of the framework sort of. And what are the must-have that we are going to have on typing inside the search box? It should give some suggestion and users should be able to select any suggestion out of that. And in terms of good to have, if you can make it more performant, if you can avoid some unnecessary network call and make it reusable and customizable, that will be great, right? And in case you can persist that previous searched result, that will be like awesome, right? So these are the expectation from the machine coding point of view. Yeah, now you can get started, Raj.
So styling, we don't have to make it like a. Do we have an exact kind of design, or we can do it in any manner?
Yes, it is open enough. You can have any sort of design. There is no Figma, or you can say wireframe.
Sure.
You can assume how you see the Google search or Flipkart search sort of thing.
Particular input box will have a button to submit, or once we type and then submit, or how is it?
No, it can be like as you are typing, basically you will get a suggestion. There is no explicit need for any enter button or the search basically button. That is completely okay.
And I think are there any APIs, or is it a local search?
Okay, so for that you can actually hard code some data at your end and make it a promise so that it mimics a behavior of a API, right? So you can come up with your own data model that you need, and you can store as an hard coded value and mimic it as an API response.
And also, do we have a default suggestion, or is it key whenever we type, then only we are going to see the suggestion?
So whenever you are going to type, then only we will get a suggestion. We don't need any default suggestion.
Okay. I guess then, so let's start then. I think let's type the basic HTML structure first.
Sure.
So our app will be, and then we'll have a suggestion list, drop down section. Yeah. So I'm like first thinking we should have an input box, and below that input box we'll have a section of suggestion list. And I think initially this suggestion list should be not visible. So we'll handle. I think that can be handled by the CSS display none property.
Sure.
So that if no text is there, we can like make it display none. So suggestion. This is a section which will have a ID as an identifier. Suggestion list wrapper. So I think suggestion, we have the input bar, and I think HTML wala part I think is pretty much sorted because we only need these two elements, and based on the data we'll be essentially making the filling in the content.
Sure.
So let's create the data file first.
Okay, sure.
So data, I think this is the data file. So we can have a suggestion of fruits. So we'll try to create a variable named fruit with some fruits as suggestion.
Yeah,
fruit names.
For that, you have to have a very good knowledge of fruits as well.
Yeah.
So it's another test. Have you like literally gone through your academics in the childhood very, very good or not? So let's see how many fruits names do you remember.
So banana, apple, orange, mango. Then
fair enough. Let's not. We won't be judging you based on the number of fruits you remember.
Yeah.
Sure.
So since this is we are storing the fruit name into the data file, like we are exporting it so that it can be imported to another file and can be used.
Sure. Yeah.
So now after the data file, we will be essentially going in. We'll be creating a util file. So util file will be essentially used in order to fetch the result. So from the client side, we'll be calling it that this util wala particular function so that it will give us the response from the fruit based on our search keyword. Utils.js, we are importing fruits from there, and then we have get suggestions. Since it will have a keyword to search, so now result will have, so we'll be essentially filtering out the fruits. Filter item. So the condition that I think, so this particular keyword should, one question is whether that particular keyword should be the part of the fruit string, of the part of the fruit, or it should be like from the beginning itself.
You can consider it from the beginning for now. That works.
Sure. So I think then substring wala method will be using.
You can consider if it is a substring also, support that also works. Anything works.
So substring starting index to keyword dot length, mainly 0 to the keyword, my substring to lowercase should be equal to keyword dot lowercase to lowercase. I guess this will give us the filter result. So return the result. Let us get inside this index.js and let's try to like call that particular function. So that is so inside index.js we will be essentially.
I like the way you're heading towards. Like you started with HTML, right? You created a skeleton, then you thought about the data you should have, then you are written a way to expose that, and finally you're going to consume it. Keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. So from the data from the utils, we are importing that get suggestions. And let's call that get suggestion with some keywords, say AP. And let's see whether our function is behaving what we are expecting. So I can see it's giving us apple. I guess then it seems to be working fine.
Sure.
Let's try for some other keyword, mango. Yeah, correct. So since it is kind of we are mimicking an API call, so there should be some delay here. So in order to do that, what we can do is we can wrap it inside a promise, and we will resolve only after a certain amount of time. So since we are resolving, and inside this is the result that we will be returning. So we are inside utils. Inside utils.js, we'll have to refactor this. So we have, since we have like stored the result, so in order to make the API response, as I said, we'll have to return a promise, and inside that promise will return this particular result after some n amount of time. So we can take it like, so resolve this particular set time out, call this set time out with resolve this result after like say 1000 milliseconds.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So you are mimicking as an API. So generally API takes some time. Similarly, you have tried to mimic it and try to make it promise. Nice. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So now if I try to so inside index.js, if I try to run that function, it will return us a promise.
Yeah.
So in order to make sure it works, we'll have to await here. So I think so it should be something like get suggestion.then, and then what's the response dot getting will log. So you can see, we can see in the console key whatever keyword we are trying to search, it gives us the response after a second.
Sure. Yeah.
So that way I think our API call this get suggestion is working as expected. We are essentially like mimicking the API call at the beginning. Whatever. So let me copy the IDs of the input box and suggestion box from the HTML file, and then we can create we can get the, so that we can get the reference to that particular DOM element from JS.
Sure.
So we will be having input box now with document.get elements by ID, element by ID as search input. So this will be essentially the input box reference, and let's go again inside index.html. So from here I'm copying the suggestion refer ID. Yeah, and again in index.js. So suggestion box, declare this as suggestion box, and then document get element by ID. So these variables will be essentially holding the reference to those particular DOM elements.
Sure.
And now, so essentially we will be now, let's create a if function and try to call that particular, attach an event listener to that particular input box. So input, since we have the reference to the input box, we add a event listener input and just try to console log it. So that way, I guess, and that get session we can comment it now for now. So whatever we type, I guess. So our input box reference, the event handler is working on. So since we have like console logged it here, now we will be writing the actual handle on input.
Sure.
So this handle input change will be essentially taking in the event. So event from here, and then from the event we will get the value from event value. So based on the input, I guess we can have another function that, so this handle input change will essentially take in the input, and its only responsibility will, what I think is key, get the input and call that particular handle search function. So we'll again create a handle search so that its task is just to take the keyword and perform the search operation. So input will be essentially calling this handle search with the value, and that's it. So this event handle input will be attaching to the event listener on input, and this handle search will be essentially the one which will be calling the get suggestion utility that we have written. So now Acha, since this get suggestion is an asynchronous operation, is doing asynchronous stuff, so we will have to somehow wait. So we can do in either way. Even like we can use the then chain of the promise, or like we can inside the handle chain we can declare it as an async function, and we can await for the results to get down, and then so we will have the result stored in a variable with get suggestion being called and with the keyword. And let's try to, I think, log the output that's coming out here. So, so we are like searching. Acha, this await wala part I left it. So A, B. So essentially we are getting the results here. So that means our handle search is working now, and then we have handle input change working. So since we will have the result, so we need a method to render the result. So we need to have handle the CSS now, so that at least our changes we can see and feel the view.
Sure.
App element, app ID with width has something, say 100 pixel. And display as no. So that way this app or app component takes this big take that much space in the DOM as required by it. So we have the app, and then so we can have the input style like this, then input as 100% it will take, and then have some random height like 50px, and let's so that looks good. And since and now so the border radius we have so we can like, since the color of the outline is changing, we will have this outline as none, so that that outline color doesn't changes. And on the focus of the input, we can have something like border as border as 2px and with some blue color, so essentially little lighter blue. So now on the focus we have. So the suggestion wrapper element, which will be essentially containing all the suggestion that we have, will be initially its display type will be essentially none, because we don't want it to be visible all the time. It should be visible only when a user is searching, and if a user, well, if the search result have any suggestions. Other than that, we don't want the suggestion to be like. So we can have this suggestion wrapper as display none, and then we can have another class saying suggestions visible. That way it will have block. So every time we have a result, we will add this class onto it, so that it display becomes it will be visible onto the screen.
Sure.
And then since it's for our use, search it, it will be essentially fewer items, but it may happen it can have like 100 or 500 elements. So we can have a height constraint on it, and overflow wise, so that user can scroll through the drop down.
Sure.
So so that should also have a border, say 1px solid, and then some other color like silver. So that way, if I remove display dot. So that way I think but these I think like somehow misunderstood. These things will be part of the session wrapper itself. It shouldn't be like whenever we add this class and this classes, these styles can be part of this suggestion board, but since display is none, it won't be visible. And if display becomes visible, then all the things will like come in place.
Sure, makes sense. Yeah.
And I think this way we can at least see the content. So let's get back to the JS file where we actually add this particular class. So whenever we have a result, so if we have, so inside the handle search, if the result length is, we have a result length. So that particular suggestion box we can add inside the class list, we can add that particular class, which was I think suggestions visible. So that way I think suggestions box dot inner. Essentially.
Okay. So what do you think where things are missing?
I think like since that ID thing is overwriting the suggestion. So since we have applied the style on the ID, so that means even if we like provide the class, so the priority of ID is higher, so that display none is being applied and not our this class style is being there. So in order to do that, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so probably like you wanted to split it, or how do you want to handle? Yeah.
Yeah, so essentially we can inside this index.html, we can add a class to that particular suggestion wrapper. As I have added it down, and inside this, let's go to style.css in order to make this based on the class.
Okay.
So now we are targeting the same particular suggestion list container, but with the class. So that way the class is that way if we attach a class, so it will essentially override this display property of that suggestion container. So this line number 24 will be overwritten by line number 20 if this suggestion visible class is applied.
Sure.
So that way we can at least I think suggestion container. So at least if I type something in the suggestion box, you can see.
Hello. Yeah, that box.
Yeah. So now we are going to create the children. Children as in the drop-down list item.
Right.
So for that, IC key results. So the results. So we can have a utility. So we are keeping every function to perform only what is required by it. So as we have like kept this handle input change, will essentially will track the handle input change and will pass on the search work to the handle search. And now since handle search has the result, it passes on the rendering the drop-down items to the render drop-down items function.
Sure.
And so we are writing. So this is the render drop-down items. So it will essentially. So inside this result box, we can have render item with that will be passed as result. So this render drop-down items is there with the list. Now inside the drop-down items, we can, instead of directly appending the items to the particular search box, we can create a fragment and attach. And so this will be a suggestion fragment, which will essentially create document fragment. So that way we aren't appending child to this particular suggestion box, and we'll only do it once at the end after we have attached all the children to the fragment, and fragment will be attached to the suggestion box.
Right.
So we'll iterate to the list. list dot for each. So item will be essentially list dot for each item. Top down element will be document dot create element and VL dot will be essentially that will be item. And then we can have a class list dot add say drop down item that we will be like writing the style for this particular class later. And then we can have element. So these will be essentially added to this suggestion fragment. Suggestion fragment. So it's append child as PL. So now we are iterating to the list, creating the top-down items and attaching it to the fragments. So after at the end, we can attach this particular fragment to the this particular suggestion box. So I think, but this may cause a problem because every time a search keyword is changed, it's trying to essentially attach the elements inside it. Perfect. So every time a search changes, we'll have to somehow first clear this suggestion box content. So here on line number 21, we are essentially every time in order to set the newer content, we are emptying, we are like essentially cleaning the children of suggestion box, so that suggestion box doesn't have any suggestions from far behind, and then we are attaching this newer fragment so that every new item gets appended to the empty list.
Got it. Fair enough. Yeah, this is look.
So we have Apple, then so we can see L. Okay. So I think our search works. So we'll have to. But since this is clear, so one problem is with this thing is the even if we are clearing the content of the text here, so we again make an API call and we don't get any results.
Correct.
So since we are not getting any results, this part like line 29 and 30 aren't getting called. So that's why we are seeing the suggestion, the earlier suggestion here.
Right.
So we need to tackle this thing using, we'll have to clear this thing. So essentially what we do, so we can have a reset drop down, default state or reset content or something. Reset. So reset state. So essentially what it will do, whenever we don't have an content, so this reset state will be called, and essentially whatever class that we applied here on line number 33, so that it makes the drop down list visible, it will essentially clean it. So here we will be class list dot remove. So now if the result doesn't have anything, so on line number 35, this handle search. So if a result exists there, so essentially we add in the class and pass on to the content to the suggestion render drop down item. And if we don't have content, essentially reset the state. So reset state will essentially clear that particular suggestion visible wala class from it, and then we can have that empty.
Got it. So yeah, we will be discussing about the approach that you are taking upon, but yes, let's keep on going with the implementation.
Sure. So and one thing that I notice is this is every time we change the input, we again call this suggestion box. So this also should not happen. I think for it, in the handle input change function, if a value exists, then only call that particular handle search function, because we are making unnecessary API call based on no input.
Okay. Got it.
And,
So, but in that case, there won't. Don't you think there will be a problem where the previous result will be shown because you are not actually clearing up and you are not showing the data based on empty string? So, say suppose we have something called apple. We removed till a, like all the PPLE is removed, but a is still there, right? If we are removing it, apple still remains there, right? Because we are not making any search or something based on the last keyword removed.
So this reset state would help here. Like for an example, this. So reset. So instead of putting in this result length, I think render drop down items, and then so this value wala part I think should be here and not here. So essentially this task that line number 35 inside handle search, its task only is to get the result and that got the suggestion drop down. So if results aren't there into this, well, so this can be handled by this handle input utility itself. The value is there, then only call handle search, else reset the state.
Yeah, this makes sense. Okay, I think these are good enough. But again, so consider if we are making this API call, then in that case, there can be too many calls that we are making. With every keystroke, basically, we are making another API call, which is your, in this case, get suggestion. And that can be a costly operation. Can we avoid it?
Yeah. So I would say, like, let's try with some. So inside the data file, I've added another fruit, say apricot, so that if I type a, it essentially give me two results so that I can like identify key this thing is happening.
Sure.
So in the data, I've added two fruits, say apricot and berry. And now let's switch to this our index.js where we can essentially see that particular thing happening. So say we type a.
Yeah, we can see two options. We have apple and apricot. Yes.
Yes. So this, let's log the result output so that that's also visible. What issues are we facing?
Yeah.
So inside a, b. Okay.
With every keystroke,
every keystroke, yeah, the call is being made.
Correct.
So in order to avoid that, making several API calls based on the keyword stroke, we can have something like we can debounce this input change function. So debouncing essentially means within a certain time frame, if that event have occurred again, so the initial reference will be cleared, and that particular function will be executed only after a delay.
Make sure.
So for an example, let's say we type A and then we again type B. So if there is if between that particular consecutive event, if there is a delay, then only that function gets executed. So essentially, we'll have to, I think, either now let's get back to the util function.
Sure.
So that we can write the debounce utility there. We can also use the lodash one, but let's
have our own. Yeah. Why to use a library when you can have a small function that helps you, right?
Sure. So debounce will be essentially accepting a function and a delay. And let's initialize the delay so that if to 500 milliseconds. So even if we don't pass a delay, so this 500 millisecond delay is there. And now then we have now it returns a function that gets executed every time, and now we have self as this context and the args as the arguments of this particular function. And we essentially set timeout. We call that particular function after some delay.
Okay.
So delay is essentially, so that particular function is being called after some delay with the self as context and the arguments list with the delay thing.
Okay.
But since, so this is the set timeout, but we need to, since we will be returning the function, we'll need to have some way in order to identify we had the reference of that particular timeout.
Sure.
So we can have the time out timer context here. And this.
So essentially, you are creating a closure in order to maintain the.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because since we are returning this function, so every time like this function gets executed, it will have the reference to this timer. So, so we have created this timer, and that timer ctx is. What is it? Such a value is being used here.
Okay, I think there's in technical the function definition is throwing the error. the arrow is missing.
Okay, sure, got it. So this is our timer, and since this function, so debounce will be essentially clearing the previous context if it is called within a delay. So that means we clear timeout, clear that particular previous context here.
Okay, so if there was previous reference, clear it out and create a new reference, and there is a new timer which will start ticking. Make sense? Yeah.
So this is our debounce polyfill, I would say, and let's get back to the index.js where we will be importing and using it.
Sure.
So we imported the debounce from the utils, and now since we will, instead of that handle change, we will attach the debounced version of that handle input change to the input event of the input box. So
sure.
with the delay of say 500 milliseconds. Syntax error. So I guess then.
Okay, with this, let's see how this behaves. So if we are typing AP, we got just one. If we type quickly Apple, we got just one result directly. Yeah, this is good enough. This makes sense. Our debounce is also working over here. Okay, so we have optimized the network calls as well. So we are not making a necessary call, and there is a debounce when a user is sure that he is looking for Apple. We are making a request. Nice. This is good enough. Okay. Anything else that you wanted to improve on, maybe style or something else that you are looking to improve? Because in terms of the functionality, we are good here, right? Let's discuss debounce. One of the most important thing that we use in our daily development, and one of the most important question which is asked in a lot of interviews, right? So let's give a try. So try to understand what is debounce. So when we talk about debounce or throttle, both are basically related to the limiting the rate of function execution, right? This is so much technical. Let's try to understand in a very bare minimum and our real use case, right? How can we forget our Motu-bhai, right? We have a Motu-bhai. Motu-bhai have given an instruction like you have to wait for maximum 5 minutes. If no one is giving you an order for say suppose 5 minutes, you come to me basically and place the order. What it meant by our waiter is basically standing in front of a customer. I went to a restaurant where I'm giving an order. How I'm giving an order? Basically, so Bhaiya, bring me one tea, one coffee, one Maggie, one pasta and one sandwich, right? There is one way where a waiter can basically take all those 5 requests and in a one by one fashion. Basically, it will take a request first for the tea. It will go to the Motu-bhai and tell that our tea is required. Second, it goes for a coffee. Third, it goes for a sandwich and Maggie and samosa and whatnot, right? But this is not the best optimized way because he's doing unnecessary job because I'm still placing my order, right? What is the other way? What he can say, sir, okay, you place a order. If there is a delay, like once you are placing your order, once you are stopping and you are thinking for certain time duration, meanwhile I will go and place a order. What it meant by, over here a person tried to make 5 requests, 5 order, and he's now taking a pause for more than 5 minutes. So waiter will wait for 5 minutes because the instruction was given by the Motu-bhai. Now he's waiting for 5 minutes. There is no new request or new order is given. What he will do, he will basically club all the request which was given and he will go to the Motu-bhai and place the order. So basically this is how your final request will go and it will look like, right? What is happening? So basically let's try to think in from the technical perspective. So say suppose there are multiple events which are being triggering tuck 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 when you are doing a search, right? So say suppose you are searching for again Apple, right? You are doing certain things. You are typing A, you are typing AP, you are typing APP, you are typing APPL, you are typing APPLE. So actually you typed multiple things, and ideally you will see the function should be executed or API call will be made for 5 items, right? But again, this is quite similar to us. So now you are still basically thinking, you are not yet decided, and you are not taking a break more than what is recommended, which is 5 minutes in Motu-bhai case. In our case it is 400 ms, right? What we will be doing, all the requests which are basically coming within that small duration, we are going to ignore, like ignore. Once our last request is there, where we see there is a delay of more than 400 ms in our case, right? So whenever you saw the event, and after that till that 400 ms, whatever the recommended duration is, there is no new request or no new event basically. what it will do, it will go and make a function execution or the API request, right? This is how it is going to work. Now, after certain interval, you see another request basically which is coming, right? And again, there are another multiple requests, tuck, 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 tuck. What you are going to do, you are going to ignore all the requests which are coming within that particular interval, which is 400 ms, right? So the difference between the event this and this is less than 400 ms, ignore the previous one. Similarly, the other two is having a less duration than 400 ms, ignore the previous one. Now, if you see from this point, there was a delay of like 400 ms. There was no new request which was made. So final, this request will be made after 400 ms because we have configured it, right? Now, let's try to see this from a technical perspective, how to implement this, right? Let's quickly see how we are going to implement. So over here, while implementing, you have to focus on two things. So first thing, you wanted to make sure your event is triggered after an interval. So in JavaScript, we have something called set timeout for that. So what we are doing a set timeout. We are making sure a function, whatever context we have previously, arguments we have previously, we are just attaching it with your function so that we don't lose the previous data, right? And then we are doing a delay, and this delay is obviously 400 ms that we have given. Now, first thing is we have added a delay to a event that is going to be triggered now after 400 ms. What is the second thing important? If there is any event which is triggered afterwards and the set timeout still exists, what we need to do, clear up this existing set timeout and set a new set timeout. How to do that? It is over here. You do a clear timeout if it is already existing and you set a new one. So these are the two things that you have to take care while implementing a debounce. That's it, right? Now try to find out and figure it out the complex use cases. What are those complex use cases? Let's see that. First use case. Now we have seen a trailing. What is this trailing? I wanted to execute the last event after a delay, right? So the second use case is I wanted to execute the first event. The first event need to be executed, right? After that, the events need to be ignored for a certain duration, right? That is the second one. Third use case is you wanted to have a trailing and leading both, which is I wanted to execute the first event and I wanted to execute the last event with a delay which is provided, right? So give a try, code this, because this is very important thing and this is being asked in a lot of interviews. And the toughest part is like adding both the trailing and the leading events, with executing these events. So give a try, share your solutions in the comment. I will be waiting for that. Throttle is another most popular interview question. So most of the use cases regarding the throttle you will see in your real life. When you do a scroll, you do a resize, right? And even in the business use cases also, say suppose you wanted to limit certain offers, like you can actually avail the new offer after a certain duration only, right? So let's try to understand from our Motubhai example, and then we will get into the technical details. So consider Motubhai have given an offer altogether. So you can actually order a free tea in the counter such that your order, the duration between the two orders should be minimum 1 hour. Like you can actually you can place a new free tea order after 1 hour of the previous order only. So what it meant by, let's try to take this example from this string. So there are certain strings, like you are actually playing some pistol game and you are doing tuck 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 tuck, like you are actually playing so a lot of shot, right? But in order to load this particular gun, it takes some time, right? You cannot actually do very quick events, right? Or you cannot shoot very quickly. So the configuration is such that the minimum delay between, or the waiting time between these two shot or two event can be any X number. In our case, say suppose it is 400 ms. Before this 400 ms, you cannot shoot the next event. So all the events which are happening in between will be ignored. So this is basically, in case of throttling, what you are saying, you are doing a rate limit of your events that can happen in a given interval, right? So in other way, the minimum time duration between the two events should be something which you have configured. In our case, it is 400 ms, right? Let's and this is again the leading and the trailing call, if you wanted to understand. Now try to understand from this throttle events. There are so many events which are happening. What it says that, okay, so for the first event, okay, I see there is no event, previous event, I will execute. Second, the second event happened, the duration between the second event and the previous event is not 400 ms, it is less than that, I won't trigger this, right? What I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead with the next event. Okay, next event and the previous executed event is having more than this 400 ms ka duration. Okay, I'm going to execute. Now, my last executed is this. Now I'm going to move forward in the same fashion, right? Now, let's see this from the technical perspective, from how you can basically code this, right? So to highlight very quickly, this event and this event does not have 400 ms ka duration, but this event and this event actually has your 400 ms ka delay, right? Similarly, these events which are happening at least at a difference of 400 ms, all these events. So that is something you are limiting, or you are having a frequency cap, right? So this is how basically it works. The any of these events which are happening will always have a 400 ms ka duration which we have configured. Now from the technical perspective, there are two important things that you have to notice as compared to the debounce. One, definitely you need a set timeout in order to execute your event after an interval. What you have to remember, you have to remember what was the last event that actually triggered, right? What it meant by, in this case, we'll quickly see what it said. Okay, the first thing we talked about, when was the last event that triggered, right? So what you have to do, you have to make sure you have to execute this event only when your delta between the last event and your current duration is greater than whatever the time limit you have given. You have to execute only then. What is the duration that you are going to set for your next event, which is very very important. So consider you have previously triggered a event before 1 minute, right? And you have given the delta between your two events should be 5 minutes. So actually, when you wanted to execute this particular event, 5 - 1, which is 4. So in your case, this limit which is going to be set for this set timeout is going to be 4. So that you wanted to rate limit, right? You wanted to make sure next event is executed if it can be after a given interval, which is 5 minutes, right? So any event which is coming in between, the delta to execute this event is always 5 minus what is the duration, which is a delta between your previous event and the current event which is coming. This is very important. Now, two other things which are very important. We have seen already in debounce also, if there is any function or you can say set timeout which is already defined, please clear it out. And in order to make it working, you have to make sure if there was no previous execution that was done or no event was executed, for the first time execute this event and maintain your last run. This last run is very important. You will see every time a function is executed, either the first time or even an interval, you are updating your last run. So give it a try. So and if you wanted to make this problem statement a bit complex, which is asked in interview, try it with the leading and the trailing leading example. Give it a try. Post your solution in the comment. I will be happy to review and I will be happy to see how you are implementing that.
User should be able to select one of the options. So that means ki every drop down item should be selectable. That means selectable as in ki once we click, the input field should be filled with that particular item of the entry. So for that, what we can do is, so that can be done like via two ways. So essentially we can attach an event listener to individual list items, and also we can attach it to the parent itself. So attaching it to the parent gives us the flexibility ki we don't we are event delegating that particular event to the parent. So since event bubbles up from bottom to top, right?
Right.
So that way, every time click happens on the children, so if we attach that parent wala on click will be called. So that way, we are not attaching like n number of event listener. Attaching a single event listener will also solve our problem here.
Sounds fair. Yeah.
Yeah. So this suggestion box will attach a add event listener as click, and so. And that will call essentially handle select. So we are defining the handle select here. So handle select essentially receives in the event. So event dot target dot value. So I think this is the thing, but so since we are attaching that particular event listened onto the parent, so it may happen like there is certain margin or padding between the parent and children, all the children. So even clicking on that padding wala empty part will also trigger this suggestion box.
Correct.
So we need to have some way ki only that particular children item was being clicked. So for that, what I think is key while creating this on this render dropdown item, while creating this creating the children, we can attach data attribute so that can be easily tracked while the click happens onto the that can be easily tracked on the handler that we are writing for the click event.
Sure, definitely.
So using data attribute, so we set the attribute data as key, and then that data key will have the item value. So essentially we will be reading the value not from the inner HTML but from the data attribute.
Okay.
While we click. So in let's like again get back to this handle select. So handle select essentially have the event. So now from the handle select event, we essentially try to read that particular key from the event dot so data set. So whatever data attribute that we provide, it's all the data attributes are available on the under the event dot target dot data set object. So that way I'm trying to destructure the key. So if key is present, that means key the drop down item is only the click happened on the drop down items. We can essentially
and which data set does it matter? Like any data set, or you are looking for a specific data set?
Any data set addition?
You have written data hyphen key. Okay, you are looking for a key inside that data set. Perfect. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I have attached a key attribute, data attribute. So I'm looking for the key. So if key is there, that means key our children that drop down item is being clicked. So if it is clicked, that it means key we will have to like so we have the input box reference. So we set in the input value to something like the key, which is the value. And again, if we select, we need to remove the drop down. So for removing the drop down, like resetting, we have the reset state. So we change the input value and then we reset the state.
Got it.
Now if I again refresh and try to
search for Apple. Let's refresh, try to search for Apple.
Click on it.
And click on it and we got the Apple as in suggestion. Nice. This is good enough. We try to type for banana. We click on this. Okay, so there are other things that can definitely be improved in terms of your key handling, keystroke. You can navigate from the key and lot more, right? Okay, I think this is good enough. Anything else that you wanted to like talk about or you wanted to add over here in terms of the implementation?
Implementation side, I think most of the things are like in place. Just one thing is key that can be it may happen ki this drop down itself is a kind of API call with a paginated thing. So we make in a an API call. It gives us back a set of like 10 or 20 results. So if it may happen ki that particular search might have like 100 items, but it won't give us 100 items. It gives us 20 again. Then we make another request. So that can be like I think handled via that pagination kind of thing, where once we reach the drop down last item, so we again make a fetch call and then we fetch the result.
How do we maintain that infinite paginated request? Do you have strategy on the UI which helps you to do that?
Using intersection observer, I think we can do that.
Perfect. So using intersection observer, you can have your infinite scroll managed over here. Okay,
But
tell me.
if
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so for tackling that thing, we at least like we are not having a state kind of thing, right? So we essentially are just doing. So if you can see this, the handle search thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so inside the handle search, you can see this line number 36. We are passing in the results, and
Correct.
using the results, we are iterating. So
Correct.
for maintaining that infinite scroll and those things, so we need to have a persistent kind of thing, like a state kind of thing, where we know the last keyword, and then we again fetch on that particular keyword, so that our data doesn't like gets emptied out, and we can like make an API call and
Correct.
append.
Right. Let's try to understand intersection observer. So what are the use cases? Like whenever we wanted to make an infinite scroll similar to we have feeds in on Twitter, we have Facebook, we have search result where we wanted to do an infinite scroll. So on Amazon and Flipkart also there are certain times you see an infinite scroll where you keep on scrolling, you keep on seeing new product, right? In Google Photos you see that. So how basically that is done? Let's quickly see one of the simple use case and then we will come into the like conceptual logic and in the implementation. So in this particular case you see there are certain items. Right now 16 items are loaded. When we scroll, basically we wanted to add more item, right? Maybe using some API or some data which we already have, right? We wanted to keep on scrolling, keep on showing the data so that it's an infinite scroll. User don't have to do a paginated click, right? So this is how basically it works. So how to achieve this? Let's try to understand by concept. So our page or you see a document is huge, right? But we see a certain piece of that particular page or web page basically, which is inside our viewport. Viewport is the area where whatever we see in our laptop or the system, right? Or the mobile basically. That viewport contains this. So consider example, we have lot of images and where we are right now seeing one image and 1.5 image. We wanted to make sure when a user reaches to the end of the second image, we wanted to load more images so that it can be showed, right? What can be done, there is one small concept that you have to understand in intersection observer. You have to add a pivot is nothing, an extra div, extra identifier which helps you to identify, dude, you reach over this point and now I will give you a call back. You take a decision, do you want to make a new network call or how do you want to proceed further, right? This is a pivot whenever you reach. So basically you add an observer to this, right? Whenever you reach over here, you will get a callback. You decide what need to be done over here. Now try to understand from the implementation perspective. So now in this particular example, we will be taking two things. One is a scroller and one is sentinel. What is this scroller? Scroller is the entire list which contains this item 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is a list. Sentinel is something which we are going to add in between, which is not visible to the human eye, but if you go in and check in your document, basically you will be able to see that. So probably in our case, let's quickly try to find out if we are able to see that sentinel or not. In this case, this is a sentinel you see, right? So basically if I have to do some changes to make you appear the sentinel, let me quickly do that. So basically you see this sentinel over here, right? So this sentinel is something which is there somewhere in between, and when we scroll, basically you see your sentinel got shifted over here, right? How it is working and how you can leverage this, let's quickly see that as well. So what we are going to do, we are not going to do anything special. So to highlight couple of things, let's see. First thing first, you need an intersection observer. This intersection observer gives you instance. Using that instance, you have to observe your sentinel. Sentinel is like that point, that checkpoint which says that pivot, dude, you reached over here. I will give you a callback. Now you decide what need to be done. And what is that callback? Callback is over here. This is a callback that you see, right? It gives you entries. Now you using this entries, you can decide do some certain things. What are those certain? So consider you are scrolling and your pivot is actually a big one, right? And you wanted to make sure once your pivot is touched from the top, you wanted to make a network call, or once your pivot is actually crossed 100%, you wanted to make a network call, or you are in mid of your pivot, like you have crossed like 20% and you wanted to make a network call, right? All of these basically can be done very easily using this strategies which are intersection ratios and is intersected. There are so many things that you get from the entry, right? So to check out all the possible things that you have entries, in our case, we just wanted to check if it has just crossed or not, right? So now what you wanted to do with this callback, we are doing certain things. So keep a note over here. What we wanted to do, we would wanted to load 15 items, but this 15 item we wanted to do in a strategic form. What is that? First we wanted to load first 10 items, and then we wanted to load another set of 5 items, total 15. Why we are doing it 10 and 5? Because after 10 item we wanted to add our pivot to make sure whenever a user is scrolling, actually he don't have to reach to the bottom, like after scrolling to the bottom and then load the new item. Once you have crossed like approximately like 65% of this entire thing, or 60% of this entire thing, which is crossed like 10 item, we wanted to load new set of data so that user don't have to basically wait, or we don't have to show the loading loader at the end of the page, right? This is how we are doing. So what we are doing, we are loading the 10 item, we are adding a new sentiment, and we are loading a next set of 5 item. So give it a try, and let me know in the comment how do you find it, right? Because this is very popular and very important use case. So share your feedback in the comment. That is good. And what about, do you see any data inconsistency that it can happen? So when I say data inconsistency, you are searching for maybe APPLE apple, but you get a result for APP. So do you think there can be such scenarios? And if yes, how do you handle it?
I guess the problem that you are talking is somewhat related to like this key, an API call goes first, like response later than the second call, right?
Yeah, exactly. So if there are two API call in parallel, and the first API call give a response, afterwards the second API basically responds, right? So it's kind of a race condition between your previous call and the new call, right? So in that case, you will see a result for the app, even the user have typed for Apple, right? So there was a flash of the screen and suddenly your data will be replaced. What do you think? How can we fix that?
Like, not exactly sure, but I have read it somewhere ki abort controller can be like used for those scenarios, but not exactly sure on the implementation part.
Sounds fair. Okay, so let's discuss about the main two problems that we see whenever we search on Google, Facebook, or you can say Flipkart, Amazon, any of these search bar. Whenever we search, there are two major problems. What are those? Let's talk one by one. First problem statement is, say suppose someone is looking for apple, right? In order to type the apple, one have to type A, then AP, then APP, then APPL, and then finally APPLE. So do you see how many network call basically we are making? So why these are different network call? Because in our logic we will be writing on change, basically there will be a trigger to the API call, right? So you see we have first network call over here, second here, third here, fourth here, and fifth here. Do we really need to make these 5 network call in order to just search for a result for Apple? So this is a like unnecessary call which are going on. Can we reduce it? First problem statement, right? Second problem statement is, consider a scenario, we have made these 5 network call. What if the response of the first network call comes after your other network call, which is, say suppose this is the latest network call, forget about all the other one. So what I mean by forget about this call, forget about this, take any of the previous call, right? In this case, the response for Apple may come in, say suppose your 100 ms, and your response from any of your previous call may come, say suppose in 200 ms. So do you see a problem and challenge over here? Yeah, the main problem is your result of Apple which came in 100 ms will be replaced by a response of any of the previous call which came after the response of your Apple. So you will end up seeing the wrong result on your screen in the drop down. That's why there is one thing which is very important that you have to take care of. So we have two problem. For both the problem we have different solutions, but one of the most important solution that we have is your abort controller. What it meant by, in abort controller, as the name suggests, you can abort the previous call, as simple as. When we say abort the previous call in this particular problem statement, whenever a user is actually typing for APP or any of these word, and if there is any active network call, please go and kill it, because your debounce, which we have talked earlier, can help you, but it can't help you for any in-flight request, right? How to use this abort controller? Abort is as simple as, if I'm going to do a new activity, make a new API call, if the similar API call is already existing or in flight in a sense is a pending, we haven't received the response, go and kill it, cancel it. That's it. How to do that? It's very simple. So what we have right now, we used to do one thing, which is we use fetch in order to make a API call most of the time. Yeah. So if we are making fetch, there is a second configuration or part which can be passed as a signal. And what we need to pass in the signal is nothing. It's a new instance that we have to create from a abort controller that is provided by the, you can say as an web API. Use this basically, and using this abort controller, what you get a something called signal as a parameter. So just pass this signal in any of the request. What you can do, anytime you wanted to abort your request, use this controller and just call a abort method which is present on that. Simple, that's it. So what you did, actually symbol is nothing, it's a signal is basically a unique identity that you have attached to any of the request that you are making. And that unique identity can be cancelled by using a controller.abort method, as simple as. Go and try it out. I hope you will have a fun and you will see how you can optimize and you can have a data consistency when you are having a application and some such use cases where you have to basically make sure the previous calls are cancelled to make your system more reliable. And okay, what if, say, suppose you are making an API call from a different domain altogether, right? So do you see any browser restriction where you are not able to make a request to different server? Like, what do you think?
Using the course cross origin resource sharing policy, the server can block in the requests that are coming from a different resource domain itself.
Nice. So basically you're saying your server have a control where which all, you can say, browser of the domain basically can consume this particular endpoint, and you can also have a control in terms of what methods and what endpoints, like in terms of the domain, they can access. I think this is fair enough. This is good enough. If you like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe and share it with your friend. Also, do let me know your interview experience in the comment. So keep watching Chakde System Design and see you in the next episode.